You had this great idea in Chesterton, all right, for this club and the downtown, you know, nightclub, comedy club, whatever. Possibly the reason it hasn't happened is because you could not get an investor to anticipate that the return would warrant that type of investment. And of course, what do investors do? Well, the first things they look at is their customer base. What's their demographic? And if they're just looking at Chesterton, then certainly it's going to fall on its face. If they're looking at the Duneland area, they start to look more attractive. If they're looking at the entire region, and they can market to the region, and they get people from outside of the Chesterton area to come here to this comedy club, then it looks even more attractive. So in a way, Chuck is right. Now, do we need to be a Chicago? Do we need to be in Indianapolis? Do we need to be in Peoria? Not necessarily. We might be able to just simply, if we think regionally, we may have the sufficient size. That's the answer, isn't it? If we think regionally, if we think that the comedy club that happens to be located in downtown Chesterton as part of our regional cultural base, then, and that attitude can change, it's another slide, the attitude can change to where we are thinking regionally, perhaps places like that could thrive. And I think that might be one of the points that Chuck is trying to make. Not necessarily we have to be a Chicago or a Pittsburgh. The reason that Pittsburgh worked, first of all, Pittsburgh worked initially because they did use public money. Right? Cleveland worked initially because they did use public money. Madison, Wisconsin uses nothing but public money for everything. You know, Madison, Wisconsin could be in other areas. It's a wonderful place. It really is a wonderful place, but it's really publicly funded, you know, primarily. And plus, they have a major university located right there. It helps to have a major university, to have a cultural center, because that major university can act as the epicenter of that cultural center.
But sometimes the university doesn't have that, like in South Bend. It has zero impact on the community.
That's changing now because if
you got to go downtown now.
There's a whole new downtown.
Now that Notre Dame is act, I know what you're talking about.
Because
before they built along Eddy, before they developed that whole area along Angela and Eddy in South Bend, you were correct. But right now, boy, it's a great place to go, and that's for all ages because Notre Dame has developed that whole area. They own it, you know. And they've developed strictly as a cultural center.
This is why I say size doesn't necessarily matter. You compare Madison, Wisconsin with some isolated communities out west, same size, two different cultural impacts. You know, Ann Arbor, you know, not the biggest place in the world, but it has all the attractions.
Well, one of the things Chuck was pointing out, I don't want to dwell too much on this, but you were pointing out all the little burgs along the Lake Michigan. Right, you go up to Charlevoix and Petoskey and Traverse City and all them. Relatively small communities, but you're absolutely right. They always have the pub, they have the clubs, but they're also vacation destinies or destinations. And if you can create a destination, that's the key. That's what I wanted to point out. If you can create a destination from outside the region to within the region, then it'll fly. Because that's what they do in Petoskey and Charlevoix. They market outside the area. They market to California. You know, visiting folks in the Midwest, hey, stop by here. You know, and people do it. And it's a beautiful place.
Right.
And so that's, you know, that kind of thing would work. And a lot of it has to do with marketing, and a lot of it has to do with how we think about our geography. Do we think that we're from Chesterton, or do we think we're from the Northwest Indiana region, or Duneland region, whatever we want to call it, all right? I don't want to confuse Northwest Indiana with Duneland, you know, but the Duneland area, which is like, what, 5 cities, 5 towns, something like that? You know, if you think that way, then perhaps that club might be more attractive. But from my perspective, and in this case I would have to agree with Chuck, we have to think even larger than that. Where's your customer base? One of the biggest reason that small businesses fail is because they are local businesses that focus too locally. They're local businesses that don't go outside of the local region, usually because they don't have the funds and resources to market outside the region. Because a lot of places start up on a shoestring, especially clubs like that. They do. They have to pay astronomical amounts of money for a liquor license and all that. So when you get to the nuts and bolts of what it takes to start a club like that, you're talking about a major investment, up to maybe $500,000 before you can open up the doors. And then how do you recoup that? You need to have the bodies to come in and sit there and drink your 7-Ups and laugh at the comedians. But you're absolutely correct. I think we have to think regionally, because that will take care of the size. Now, Derek makes a point where size doesn't necessarily matter if you can market outside the region and make it a destination.
Yeah, and just because you're big is not going to guarantee that you're going to be successful.
Oh, no. And just because you're small doesn't guarantee that you're going to fail. You know.
Yeah.
But you have to think. What do they say? Act locally, think globally, something like that. You know, whatever that adage is. You have to think outside the region. All right. So let's get back. Wrong one. There we go. All right, drivers. Conclusions here. Oops, get out of here.
One measure I had of sophistication is how many high-end restaurants do you have in the community? It's a really good measure.
Define high end.
High-end in the sense of beyond, other than American cooking. But
Other than American cooking, so
gourmet,
what we need is a
gourmet,
good Swedish restaurant.
No. Gourmet restaurants.
Gourmet restaurants? Okay.
Yeah.
How many do we have in LaPorte?
We have two.
Where?
Enzo's. That's somebody place you'd be comfortable in bringing a business associate from out of town.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or Portofino's.
Oh, Portofino's? Okay.
Yeah. So the thing is that you're beyond the normal fare of food and something. If I was in Moline, Illinois, I don't know where I would take anybody. Big city doesn't have it.
Okay.
Go to South Bend, there's 2 or 3 places.
Oh, there's several places in South Bend.
Yeah.
High priced and and Mishawaka even more so.
I know you want to get past this. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It's okay.
I was going to bring up Valpo. I thought Valpo was a really good example of a local community that's kind of been successful. And obviously there's other factors go in. They have the university, which is huge. Again, back to your point, they figured out their parking downtown, which was a huge deal for them, because before that they couldn't do what they do now. But I would say, as far as the restaurants go,
Yeah, about 2 or 3.
great. They have a great selection.
Yeah.
You walk that downtown, and it gives you that, that metro atmosphere a little bit of.
Right.
I feel like you're actually in downtown, and I think that's why they had success marketing themselves. that way.
Because that's very, very obvious when you bring in a client from out of town.
Oh,
It's very obvious. Where are you going to take
Here,
them?
where do you take them?
Well,
You take 'em
South
to
Bend,
Louis.
you take
I'm
them
gonna take 'em to Louis.
South Bend, or 2 or 3 places that were just remarkably good.
Yeah.
And here we're well placed too.
Okay.
So the thing is that's sort of.
LaPorte really cannot support a very high-end restaurant because Bernanke's place. What was the name of her restaurant? Sauté. Remember
Yes.
Sauté?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, excellent restaurant, but the average plate was $22. Okay, well that doesn't fly in LaPorte. You have to really bring people outside of LaPorte to frequent that restaurant, and that's why it didn't work. And that's why she moved to South Bend. But anyway, that's how it is. That is a high-end restaurant, but it also failed. What are the high-end restaurants in Valpo? Are there any high-end restaurants in Valpo? Who's from Valpo?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
There's several.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's definitely.
I can't
Yeah,
remember.
like I think in Chesterton, Lucretia's is kind of a high-end restaurant, right?
And then there's Taj, which does Indian cuisine.
Exactly. Okay, so you have that. Okay, so they have the demographic, and you have to have the income base in order to support that. LaPorte just didn't have that for Sauté, and it was a wonderful restaurant. But no. Oh, and the French place.
L'Amour.
Yeah, Cafe L'Amour.
But again, both places, another thing you got to factor in, absolutely no dedicated parking, which is a huge deal.
Right.